6 o'clock. So I will call the December 9th, 2020, 6 p.m. special board meeting of the Alamedicine East School District to order. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and our flag is right here, so we'll do that first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call of board members. We'll start with Amanda.
Amanda Lacey.
Jeremy Corner.
Sharon Rupp.
Sonia Peterson.
Jeremy LeBlanc.
Ron Winter.
Thank you. All members are present. We'll do approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? I have no additions or deletions. Okay. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Reading of the Alamedicine East School District mission statement. Does anyone have that in front of them? So our mission is to provide a caring environment of high expectations that prepares every student for a successful future and instills the value of learning. Public address to the Board of Education. Was there any submissions to be read?
I believe we have received numerous emails and things. You'll have to help me. Were there any that said that they definitely wanted them read aloud?
No, not that I recall.
How about any of the rest of the board members see?
I don't remember seeing any.
Okay. So I tried to forward absolutely everything on to you that was asked to forward on to you. So.
Okay, thank you very much for doing that. Next item is our discussion items. Mr. Schneider, your superintendent board report.
Okay, so I'm going to maybe not go in just the order that's on there for discussion, but the whole point here is I'll explain a little bit. Maybe we can dialogue about it. You can ask for clarification. So first of all, just a little background. I don't know what was about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, the MDE came out and said that what we had been using for hybrid, the definition changed, all right? And so that changed for all school districts in the state of Minnesota. So all of us looked at that and tried to come up with a plan on how we would apply that. That doesn't mean we have to change what we're doing. It just means we have to change how we identify it. So basically it was about semantics. So what that required is 1 day a week for it to be called hybrid. 1 day a week had to be in distance learning. We still have all the other requirements that we have to have, and one of the big challenges for us is STIN care. So we have to keep that in mind, that that's one of our challenges that MDE has asked us to undertake to provide that care for our essential workers. So far this year, we have spent 6 weeks at BRE in distance learning. This is our 6th week. The middle school has spent 8 weeks and the high school has spent 8 weeks. That's by my records. Total weeks in hybrid, BRE and the middle school actually have not been in hybrid yet. They've been in person. And they've been in person at BRE and the middle school for those 6 weeks. And the high school has only been in hybrid for 6 weeks. Otherwise, they've spent the rest of the time in distance learning. So we've had 2 weeks of suspended activities, and that was the ramp-up time right before the start of football and volleyball and cross country. So those things were suspended for a period of time. When we met with our incident response team last week, we talked about a slow return from distance learning. That's what they recommend. And by a slow return, they mean don't be distance learning and then all of a sudden jump back into in-person. We haven't used in-person very much this year, so we just need to keep that in mind. What they encourage is what's called a phased-in approach. So that's a new term that you folks have probably not heard about. The phased-in approach, what it does is it brings in a few grades at a time. So for example, maybe it's pre-K comes in one day and a couple days later, pre-K through 2, a couple days later, pre-K through 5 in the building, and then we keep doing that until we get all the students back in some fashion. The advantage of that is that decreases our the amount of students on our transportation. So that's, and it also reduces the number of students in our building. That's what they encouraged. It's not required. It is what they recommend. So does everybody understand what I'm talking about when I talk about phased in? Are there questions about that? I'm going to try and pause at times here so that we don't get to the end and things get muddled up.
I think I understand a little, but are we talking, like, would be 3 grades at a time or whatever we choose to bring back?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. And so I'll give you an example. I believe Lakeview came back, and I believe they came back K through 6 on Monday and 7 through 12 on Tuesday. Technically, that's a phased-in approach. So, does that make sense?
What's the advantages of the phase-in?
The advantage is we have less students in here. We start to identify if we have problems. We suspect that we have positive cases out there that are not being reported to us. And we would find out more of those as we bring people back into the building. That could be true for staff members too. Not likely. I think we have pretty good pulse of what's happening with our staff. Our biggest thing would be students. So,
What idea, what levels or what grades would you recommend then?
well, I'm not, I would say we do it in a slow approach, but I think we want the principals to kind of explain what they're going to do before I say that that is what we should do.
There's a proposal, I mean, obviously they put some thought into this then, and it's
Yeah.
been, into the works, and,
And I think it goes without saying that our parents and students want to be back in the building. Parents want the students in the building. I think so does the community, and so do the teachers. Right? All staff members want kids back in the building.
And if I can speak for the board wants them back in the building as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't want them back here if we can control everything. So to move on from that, just to give you a little background, first of all, the vaccine. I'm not really going to cover that because we don't know a timeline for the vaccine, so I won't spend any time talking about that. We can't really count on it, even when the vaccine comes out. So let's not talk about that. Let's talk just a bit about the new quarantine guidelines. I included on my report my understanding of the new quarantine guidelines. It is a reduced quarantine time for one-time exposures, for people that haven't been exposed to it one time. What that means, that's kind of confusing. We will need at some point better guidance than what we have, and we'll have to do a lot of work if we're going to implement it. Household members will still need to quarantine for 14 days from the last day of exposure. So we talk about, last week on my video, I talked about a 24-day quarantine for a student maybe a young student that can't isolate in the house, away from the other members of the household, we still could end up with some 14-day or 24-day quarantines. So 10 days after being positive and then 14 days after the last exposure to that positive person. In order to test negative and get out of quarantine on day 7, you must get tested at least 5 days after exposure. At least 5 days. So we'd have to have documentation of that. Get a PCR test. That's not, a lot of the tests are not PCR tests. And Sonia, you probably understand that better than me, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, the Upper Sioux community, I don't believe they're using the PCR test.
Like you stated, the rapid tests are not PCR, and I'm pretty sure they're still using the rapid tests, so.
Yep. And it's a good indicator for them.
And like Jeremy was saying earlier about the saliva test, I'm not sure if that saliva test is a PCR test or not. To be honest with you, I'm not sure.
I don't know. After stopping the quarantine, then the person must maintain 6-foot distance from others, wear a mask when around others, and avoid crowds and others at high risk. Clearly, it's quite confusing and will take some time for us to ensure we are following it accurately. We will need to continue to follow the decision tree. The decision tree hasn't even been generated by the Department of Health yet. So for us to jump in and create a decision tree would be challenging. It could help us with some situations, and where I really see that is it could help us with some staffing. But on the negative side, it could confuse our stakeholders. So understand we have to redo all of our documents, figure out which document we're going to use from here on. Those templates aren't out there yet. I don't know a timeline on that. We'll work on that. So then a couple weeks ago, I don't know, maybe it wasn't even that long, the principals, I challenged them to come up with 2 different scenarios for hybrid. What we currently use for hybrid is in-person Monday through Thursday, and then Friday is distance learning. That's basically our only hybrid model that we have. I asked them, other than the high school has an AB hybrid. I asked them to actually develop an AB hybrid for all grades and what that might look like. So they're going to propose or talk a little bit here and take your questions about that. Understand in a hybrid model, though, we still have to provide child care. So that throws a wrench in things. That makes it challenging because we have to staff that STING care on those other days. So if a student is only here on A days, on B days, they go to STING care if they're 12 or younger. So that's an obstacle for us. Staffing that would be a huge obstacle. All right? Mr. Luff, do you want to kind of step up and talk a little bit about I would really highlight your middle school hybrid plans because I don't think your high school hybrid is changing much, is it?
I submitted all documents to Mr. Schneider today. One with the updated in-person hybrid learning. Some of it is the semantic piece of it. It's just updating with the new terminology. According to our school calendar that you guys adopted previously, as of this year with Fridays with virtual learning, every Friday we would be in hybrid learning for the rest of the school year. I submitted 2 options. The first option is a current option that we were currently running prior to going into distance with the addition of the Friday, the virtual day. So in there we would be looking at the kids, all kids in grades 6 through 8 would be in the building every day. With the space and moving around, we currently have 8 to 9 classes that cannot accommodate all of the middle school kids in there. Kids are already familiar with what rooms they have to go to. That would be the addition with the library back online. That's a great space to use. We lost the junior high wrestling room, but we still have the band choir rooms that are available. So the majority of our classes are in the classes, or the traditional classroom, but there are a few that are out there. Like I said, that is probably the most familiar our kids are the last time they were in the building. Our high school would still be looking at the AB schedule. Obviously, as you know, with the update of the hybrid plan, the real only difference is we don't have to send out a letter every Monday saying Monday is an A day, Monday is a B day. That's already been established for them. So in the setting, we still would be able to work with our special ed families to meet the needs of our learners there, as well as to provide support remotely to them. Option 2, as Mr. Schneider said, would be just expanding the 50% attendance, or excuse me, 50% attendance for the middle school, grades 6 through 12. So that would be looking at our AB days with our virtual days on Fridays, but that would be up and down for all of our kids. In it, obviously, with the pros and cons, there's less kids, there's less exposure, less movement. But like we said, it would be in there, it would be introducing a new plan to families once we've already established kind of a routine for them. So it is possible. We're ready for any decision that is made to do it, to be able to bring the kids in. But those are the main things. Obviously, we keep our 6 feet of distance. All the rooms are already set up that way. Our hallways are set up. Our bathrooms are marked. So everything's ready to go for the middle school and high school come in. It really is the decision is if you guys want to adjust the learning to go 50%, 6-12, or keep it as is, where just the high school goes AB, 50% attendance, and then the middle school would come in 100% of the time. Any questions on the updates or changes proposed?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we were to go with the 6 through 8 every day,
Yep.
where would the music programs be located if we're using their room for other classes?
Currently, right now, due to the sizes of like the 6th grade are, for example, the choir is in the choir room, so that is good. I don't have it right now, but since we've been able to get the library back on after the storm damage, that has now been filled up. I want to say there's only 1 or 2 hours that are real in conflict. So like for an example, the 6th grade choir is in here. So the 6th grade choir comes in here every other day it meets. The 6th grade band is already in here. Middle school, as we get into it, is if we do make some adjustment, right now, as you know, all of STING Care is in the auxiliary gym. So that would be something that we would have to figure out because we do have 4 hours of Phy Ed that if we bring 100% of the middle school kids in, the average Phy Ed classroom is roughly 25 to 30. So we do have the alternate space of the gym down there, but what we lose by doing the AB schedule with BRE is the large spaces. So in there, we would have to be more focused on sectionals rather than all groups. So rather than all 40-plus middle school band and 40-plus middle school choirs getting together the 2 times a week that's currently scheduled, we would have to break it down into small sectionals while those kids are doing other pieces of work to do it just to fit into this space, which we can roughly fit about, if they're playing band, we can't fit a lot in here because if they're playing without mask, it has to be 12 feet in distance. If you've seen in the concession stand area, there are lots of red squares all over. Each one of those are 6 feet apart, so there is some area out there. But like I said, is in that situation, it becomes very difficult. If STING Care is here, that's one thing that I still have to work with Mr. Knapper on. And that would be the first thing we would find out is what other spaces do we have available to make sure we can accommodate STING Care into there. But currently right now, Jeremy, if there was no STING Care involved, we do have a schedule set up for the band to choir to be in the auxiliary gym 2 days a week and then Phy Ed the other 2 days a week, so it's even. When the band choir is in the auxiliary gym to be able to bring everyone together, then the Phy Ed class goes down and uses half of the gym space, which is not being used for cafeteria.
So if we were to go to the 50-50 or AB schedule for 6-8, there would be less logistics for moving classrooms around because they'd be able to use their existing classroom?
Correct.
Would that help to be able to provide STING Care as well? Or no?
Still have to be figured out into the details of it, but if you look at it, if we have a class of 30 middle schoolers and it's down to 15, there's more of a chance. We can do band and choir in either this space and or within the band choir room because we do not have to move anyone around. Also, that does free up the library to be used as a larger space too. Because I believe when I did the schedule, there was only one high school class that when you break down A through L, that there's 21 kids in that one class, and that's the only class that has to be moved, according to my numbers that I ran the other day. So
That was a high school class or junior?
that's a
high
high school class that has to bump in. That class, no matter where we're at, is going to have to bump into somewhere. So whether it's a library or currently that class goes down into the band room 1 hour a day. So
So AB schedule 6 through 12 was logistically easier for classroom spacage.
it is, yeah. We can make it work. My biggest concern is like we said, is, you know, if we make the switch now, and we know, we've been very adaptable, very flexible all year, is just making sure that, you know, we communicate with the families, okay, we're going 50%, you know, what does that communication look like when we come back to 100%? And we had talked a little about that, and I don't know if Mr. Schneider will share that or not, but, you know, whether we finish the 2020 year this way or how we kind of come back within the 21 school year, is we're going to work our tails off to make it work, whatever is decided, so. Yeah, we can make both work. The final thing would be just to make sure we're sting care.
So is that the biggest issue with that, is sting care?
Yeah.
So just thinking in my head, I know this would be an inconvenience. Is it possible to use the KCC for sting care? Just a thought.
At this point, it's closed, right, Tim? So I mean, under the current,
Sure. I don't know how
yeah, under the current, no. I don't know. I guess I would have to defer to Tim. How do you think they'd be amenable if the governor lifts things on the 18th, on the 19th, lets it expire? Do you think they're going to let us use that space?
I guess, I don't know, I mean, certainly ask, I don't know. I don't know why they would, you know, I mean, if they can open up to people who have memberships and the public, I mean, they could do it each day.
I'm just thinking if that's a space that's usable, I know we've talked with our storm damage, you know, alternate spaces to make up for what we've lost. Maybe that's a spot to look at.
To rent?
Right. Just a thought.
Yeah, originally we didn't look at it then because we assumed their members were using it during that time. And
Right.
I think they do have a fair number of people that use it throughout the day.
Right. Just trying to throw something out, trying to,
Well, you're trying to come up with the extra space we might have that's underutilized, right?
It wouldn't hurt to ask, you know, just to see. Because you think about it, it'd just be during school hours.
how many kids are we talking?
I don't know, could be as many as somewhere between 60 and 70. It
Okay.
changes every day. based
Sure.
on who sends their kid. We typically, you know, if nobody's sick or quarantined, we could have 65.
Sure.
That's, I believe, how many are signed up.
But
That's
were you,
kids.
I'm assuming you're thinking maybe we would do this K-12, whereas maybe we do something different with our elementary than our middle school, and then our elementary might not need sting care.
Well, I'm just throwing it out as an option if we needed the sting care. I'm trying to find a space is kind of where I was at right now. I mean, obviously there's more to put into it, but that's kind of what I was, because he made the remark that the sting care could be the issue. So that's why I was trying to look at an alternative space possibly for it.
You gotta remember that if we're in hybrid K-5, we have half as many kids theoretically in sting care every day, because half of them will be in the building.
Right.
The other half will be in, now, I think the numbers might rise, you know, if all of a sudden every other day,
But we,
you're gonna watch your kid, but
Right.
it is now half those kids would be in the building.
so it could be closer to 30, 35 kids. Okay.
How many students show up for 6th and 7th grade?
6th and 7th, or 5th, 6th and 7th?
6th and 7th.
5 or fewer probably each day. I think there's 7 that are actually signed up, but typically we don't get all 7 on the same day.
What I'm saying is if we did something with BRE, then those 5th graders who are with the 6th and 7th, just so we could have greater space, that's why we did that.
So the phased-in approach, are we going to talk about that now with Ryan? Or when does that fall?
Not yet.
Okay.
Let's hear Lisa's out, because the phase-in approach to me is a K-12 decision,
Yep.
or a thought could be about
Yep.
K-12.
Perfect.
All right? Any more questions?
Yeah, before you go, Ryan, so just out of curiosity, what's stopping us from going 100% high school?
Space in
We
the
didn't talk
rooms.
about that.
The number of rooms that are big enough to accommodate class sizes of 25. Because right now, like for an example, if you get in this wing in the 65, the rooms can accommodate right around 18 or so into it. When you get to, for an example, the 30 building, we'll just say Mrs. Butterbro's room, can only accommodate 15 of 20-plus students that are in there. We have roughly 25 kids in econ, which is a senior level class. Mr. Baumgartner, safely at 6 feet, can currently put in about 15, 16 kids. So our class sizes over there are much smaller, or the classroom sizes, square footage are much smaller than over here. There's a few over there, but
So,
that's currently,
Mr. Left, are you saying then we don't really currently have the space to send those high school kids back in person right now?
at 100%.
At 100%, just
Correct.
a scenario.
At the 6 feet, we do not have the room.
Okay. Thank you.
So a bunch of these, when you listed the cons, which thanks for writing out pros and cons, it's helpful to have that. A bunch of them, are related back to the staff, and them catching or losing those people because of additional COVID. Is there other things that we can do to help them? Have they expressed any, additional PPE that they would like to see, that would make them help them feel a little more comfortable while they're here? Not only comfortable, but protect them maybe?
I guess directly to me, I have not. I don't know with to Mr. Schneider or to Cassie if there's been other requests, but if you're talking like plexiglass and things like that, they really haven't done too much of that into it. They want their soap bottles refilled every day. They want things to wipe down, and they want to teach. So, but I mean, the ones that have requested, I think we've met every request into it. It hasn't been anything too drastic to do it, so.
So that's not a.
No, when I put
holding
the
back
cons in
issue.
there, that con could be
Okay.
any Joe into any fear of it. Just like anything, it comes down to staffing. And as of right now, staffing wise in the building, we're okay. We're healthy. Knock on any wood that I can find right now, we put one out into there, and we don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, with quarantines and everything, who knows, so. But yeah, as far as the high school, yeah, we want the high school. We just talked about them today. I just read the parent survey. Get them back, yeah. The senior year and the junior year and the experience, and I've said this before, you walk down senior hallway, where our high schools, in all high schools are, they're in mono right now, because not all of everyone there, and we're limited by a lot of stuff. Trust me, we'll blow the roof back off when we can get them back in, but right now, that's just kind of the way it is. But it comes down to our space in our rooms just aren't big enough to accommodate all the high school kids.
You touched on that parent feedback form.
Yep.
When do you expect to have results to us on that?
We have, it's supposed to be done on the 14th. I'll give Mr. Schneider the result of it, and share it with you guys.
Okay.
So we use that, we bring it back to our site team and get a lot of feedback to see what it is. It's a lot of the typical feedback. The kids are tired, their eyes hurt, the Zooms, it's communication, support, getting them back in the building. I had to summarize what I just saw of 76 responses. When you look at the 4-point scale, I want to say last year, last time we did this, and I don't know the exact date, it was right after in November. We had about a 2.75 average, which of a 4-point scale, so it's on the right side, but we took some of those things, we went back in our staff development days, tried to make some changes, so I'll be able to get those back.
Is there any chance that we can get kind of an intermediate where the poll's at sooner than the 14th?
Yep.
Knowing that it's not the final, but.
Yeah, I'll share it with
a
Mr. Schneider.
gauge as to where we are so far.
Yep, I can share it with Mr. Schneider, and
What day do you think is a good day to maybe get an intermediate? You feel would be a good time?
anytime.
You want it closer to the end, though, don't you?
Well, we would want to get a
Can you
snapshot
give them a
of it.
summary by Saturday morning?
I just,
An idea?
Are you saying so we have something for Monday night's board meeting?
Sure, definitely before that, yeah. I'd just like to have some kind of intermediate, knowing that it's not the final, but where we at, that's why, you know.
I'm assuming you want to see some of the comments more than just the points.
Well, yeah, I want to see comments. I'd like to see where, you know, your guys' feedback on it, comments on it also. You know, just like you said, here's what you're seeing so far. I think it would be a good tool to at least reference, take a look at it.
No, that sounds pretty good. I feel really good with the 6-foot spacing and the kids wearing masks. I feel this middle school, high school building should be a pretty safe building with what we've got out there. I mean, I like to feel pretty comfortable with the kids coming back in, that we're protecting each other pretty well, so.
They're kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, we very proud of our student
Yeah.
body, actually, the time in and out, and the few kids that we've had come in, we've had very few issues with the masks and that type. Do we have issues? Yes, they're kids. So, but, I mean, everything is in place, the signs are ready and that, and to do it, so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Lisa, Mrs. Hanson, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Love.
All right, good evening. Tonight I will be referencing 4 documents, which I believe you may have a link to. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to start with our hybrid option 1. And I will just say right away that we did have to backtrack quite a bit from our prior hybrid model because of the new definition. So option 1, the main points of option 1 for preschool through 5th grade, all of our students would be on site for full days, Monday through Thursday, with Fridays being a distance learning day for all students. In that document that contains the plan, you will see changes that we're recommending be removed are noted in red, and additions are being noted in green. I want to touch base a little bit on some of the pros and cons for Plan 1. Again, that's with all students in the building Monday through Thursday and no students in the building on Friday. Pros would include academic stability and additional support for our elementary learners, mental health stability and additional support for our elementary learners. Parents would only need to find daycare on Fridays. Improved attendance, interpersonal communication, less distractions for students. Sting care would only need to be offered on Friday mornings. Greater academic support for our special needs students. Less students would be receiving distance learning at one time, which would create less time for staff members, or less staff member time. Greater consistency with the students, just keeping with a consistent schedule. Cons would be more physical bodies in the building could lead to greater transmission among students, a greater likelihood of staff being positive and or quarantined. Staff positives and quarantines could leave us shorthanded. Greater pressure on internal staff to cover absences, and increased exposure, more bodies in the room, more bodies on the bus, so forth. Moving on to option 2, main points, we reference option 2 as an A-B schedule. One of the first things we did was, prior to this change, the high school had used last names as A through L and M through Z. So that was a starting point for us, but so we utilized that. Then we looked at families who have different last names living in the same home. We also tried to look at situations foster care, maybe 2 adults in the same home with children with different last names, wanting to make sure that they were either all an A or all a B. At that point, we then looked at our classroom sizes. And so let's say typically there would be 20 in a classroom. What we did find was some classrooms were not weighted correctly. So you might see 4 on a B day and 16 on an A day. So then the next thing we did was we started shifting singles, or children that are the only children in our district. We had the flexibility of moving them. So for example, if you're in Anderson and you would have automatically been on the A list, we could put you on the B list. And so with that, it really was an effort to try and make the classrooms as equal in size as possible. It's not going to be 50-50, but we certainly did our best with that. Some pros and cons for option 2. Pros, less bodies in the classroom. Actually, I'm going to back up one other point, backing up to option 2. So if you're an A student, you would come on Monday and Wednesday. You would be in person on Monday and Wednesday. If you're a B student, you would be in person on Tuesday and Thursday, and all students would be doing distance learning on their opposite days, and all students would be doing distance learning on Fridays. The one change that we did add in here, which is a little bit different, but we feel really strongly about, is if we were to go to the AB model, it would be our recommendation that all preschool and all kindergarten students be on site full-time. One of the goals with the AB model is to reduce class sizes. However, we are really fortunate and we have small class sizes already. So for example, if we have 14 kindergarten students, that's still considered a decent class size, and we would be able to maintain that 6-foot distance. In some cases, if we were to split that in half, it would be even less than 7 because we figure in some of our full-time distance learners. We could easily see class sizes of 5, and that we just feel with the students' age that it's really important for them to be in the building. So that would be the one change on that AB model that would be different from everyone else. They would be on site full-time Monday through Thursday. Looking at the pros and cons, so pros would be less bodies in the classroom, work or learning spaces, which would allow for greater compliance with social distancing. It would allow for less bodies on the buses, less exposure to the virus when someone is infectious. Cons, reduced academic progress and stability, reduced mental health progress and stability. Staffing STING care would be difficult because, as Mr. Schneider noted before, on those off days, we would have to figure out how we can staff that. Because, for example, in my building, 90% or 95% of our paras are there for special ed support or for supervising things such as lunch. And so if we need to take some of them out to supervise STING care, it would be, and we actually, Nicole and I did a little bit of a draft of, well, what would that look like with our special ed needs? And it would be difficult. Not impossible, but it would be difficult. In addition, another con would be change of food service needs. So for example, their ratio of grab and go and hot meals would change based on what it is right now. Device wear and tear, we've had many conversations in the elementary on what would we do with our devices that are all currently at home. And one of the things that we came to the fact that we believe our 4th and 5th graders would be responsible enough and they're old enough to bring those devices back and forth. But for the younger kids, we actually would recommend that those devices would be left at home and not brought back and forth, so on their off days, they would be available for that child.
Would you have devices then on their on days, the days
No.
that they're in school, so they would not be using any kind of devices
No, they would not.
on their on days?
And there's been lots of discussion on that. A lot of it went towards the fact that when we have them for 50% or even less time, we would rather not use the device and want to get as much face-to-face, hands-on instruction because they're already getting enough screen time.
Agree. Can I ask one more question, Mrs.
Yes,
Hanson?
absolutely.
So with the Group A and the Group B, the Group A, how it, Mondays and Wednesdays, is that every week then? It's not, it doesn't switch like the high school?
Does not switch.
Okay.
No, it would not.
Thank you.
Some additional cons would be reduced communication, increased teaching models. So for example, we would have instruction for on-site, at home, full-time distance learning students, and students that are out ill for a couple days or on quarantine. New bus routes would have to be looked at. Sting care every other day will expose students and staff to another group, increasing the number of people they are exposed to. And a sting care location would also need to be determined. At the bottom, I did list pros and cons that we talked about for, and we feel really strongly if we go this route, we would really like our preschool and kindergarten students in the building. Just for educational purposes, social skills, and all of the items that I listed here, it's really important to have them back in. I do want to share that I did ask my certified staff of those two options, which one they felt was best and which one that they supported more. As of about 3:30 today, 70%, it was just under 70%, support option 1, and 30% supported option 2. Mr. Luft mentioned that staffing was right now not a huge concern in the high school and middle school. I will say that in the elementary school, that is not the case. I looked ahead. We are keeping very detailed lists of absences and what's coming. So for example, on Monday already, we have 13 people that we know will be out of the building. Of those, 2 of the 13 are not COVID related. And that's pretty similar for, like looking at Tuesday, it's 15. Questions for me?
On one of your cons there, Mrs. Hanson, you mentioned reduced mental health progress and stability. What do you mean by that?
So, one of the things when we were working on our pros and cons, it was difficult to not compare 1 and 2. So, when that con was put on there, that's saying that we would have an increase of mental health stability with our students if they were with us every day versus every other day.
Oh, with option 1.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, if we were going to compare that to distance learning, then the A-B model would give us an increase. Basically, our view is the more time we have them in front of us, the better it's going to be.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Other questions? Yes.
Given the difficulty of staffing in the at BRE, which model do you feel is more attainable for you?
Well, I have some concerns about B, or excuse me, option 2. We've called it option B, but option 2 for staffing, but the logistics of that with elementary students and our families, I think is going to be difficult. We've had the conversation about staffing. So is it easier to staff a kindergarten room of 7 versus 14? Not necessarily, because we don't mix groups. So for example, if I am short a kindergarten teacher, it would not be in the best interest of the students to split that class in half and send half to the other 2 kindergarten rooms, because now you're widening that group of students. However, the numbers, I think there's a reality that I want to believe it might be a little bit easier with smaller numbers, but for staffing, but I don't know that that would outweigh the chaos that it could be for families to try and keep track of that. You know, we have a plan that we utilized earlier this fall when we, you know, were struggling with staff members being in. And, you know, basically it's a flow chart of, okay, because right now we really do not have a sub pool. It's very slim. And so we created an in-house plan that says, okay, the first position that we can't fill, this is the person we're gonna pull. And he or she is gonna be put in that classroom. Second position is this person. You know, I'm on that list. You know, we have a lot of people in the building because what we try and focus on really is covering those classrooms and covering special ed needs. Other questions?
You know, some of the origin of the AB, that why I challenged them to do that is because I saw, like, for example, the school I came from, Blue Earth area, they've been able to hang in there a little bit longer in hybrid because, and I believe some of it has to do with the AB, only having half of the kiddos in there. So I thought we should at least consider that as an option. So that was kind of, and I know it's a ton of work for our principals to develop that and just to think it through because they already did a bunch of work in the summer to try and examine that. But I just thought it was important to do that. Now, it's not fair to compare Blue Earth here because Faribault County doesn't have what we have. They don't even have the cases in their building like we have. But I just thought it was an idea to take a look at.
I just have one more question. With that AB model, would we still need, like with the shortage with teachers, would we still need the same amount of teachers? Because you still have like 7 kids in that
Yes.
5th grade classroom, 7 in another, so you pretty much aren't cutting down on any amount of teachers with that
That is
AB
correct.
model, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
One thing I will add to something that Mr. Schneider said is, you know, when we looked at the AB model and we spent a lot of time looking at that as a staff, and we even got down to the point of, okay, well, what is B day going to look like for an A student? You know, what will an A day look like for the B student? And, you know, so we were able to figure out a lot of those logistics. But in a sense, you know, at that point, we would still have devices at home, so they would have access to that.
You're doing hands-on in the classroom on days that are in school. But how are the kids at home that are virtual that day? How is that correlating? Because these people are working on benefit. These people are working on, you know, some whatever
Right.
app that they got working on. Stuff that doesn't really matter day to day.
Well, and actually, we have created a plan that it would mesh. It is going to be a little bit different based on grade level. So, for example, I'll touch on 4th and 5th grade. If you are a 4th grader and you're an A student, on a Monday, let's say, for example, that you're going to have math lesson 5-3, adding decimals. When you go home on that next day, because our teachers in the 4th and 5th grade and even in 3rd grade would still run their live Zooms. So if your child is at home, they would still see the same lesson that the in-school students are seeing. That gets a little bit more difficult with the younger students, but for 3rd, 4th, and 5th, they did come to an agreement that they would be able to manage that.
So a lot like the same that you did in the beginning of the year with the kids that were distant learning
Yes.
at home,
Yes,
along the same line of that.
yes, correct. Did that answer your question? Okay. And we wavered back and forth. We had conversations about, well, on their off day, is that a paper packet? You know, is that no Zooms? And 3rd through 5th felt like, you know, we have a really good rhythm going right now. The students are used to it, the teachers are used to it, and, you know, Stacy Hins has been a phenomenal support for staff to get them to a point where they feel comfortable. You know what, I'm going to turn on the Zoom, and I'm going to go ahead and teach my math lesson. And we're no longer dealing with the technology like we were at the beginning of the year. So.
I think that's a good
questions. Other questions?
Kind of related, but maybe not. So, as far as going back, so there were some concerns as far as switching back to that other model and being prepared, as far as from a teacher standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Are they able to use a bunch of the plans or even use it as a high level for a basis to start creating if we switch back? I don't know if I said that right, but are they able to use what we've had when we started school as kind of a basis to create what they need if we
Are you referencing option 2 when I said that 30% supported that and 70 supported the other? Is that what you're referencing, or?
Well, if we bring them, if we bring the kids back, you know, you can create the plans and stuff. Are they able to use a bunch of the plans from the beginning of the year as basis? Or do they gotta start from scratch?
I think it's going to be a combination. Obviously, for option 1, where we would have all the students in the building, that's going to represent September and October. If we go with option 2, it's definitely, as a teacher, things are going to have to be done differently. So would it be additional work? Absolutely, yes. But they also have a lot of those skills already. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, and maybe it's more of a middle school, high school type question. Mr. Locke, as far as, you know, are they able to use a bunch of those plans or things that they had in place before we start switching to distant learning
Right.
to, you know, when we bring the students back in?
And I just want to
mean
maybe
lesson
on a final
plans?
note say that, you know, the elementary staff, like I said, 70% really support option 1, because our goal would be to create some normalcy and to get our kids back in.
I think the whole thing tonight is, we know we want those kids back in school. It's just a matter of
Absolutely.
when they need to come back to school.
So can I throw one in? So
Yeah.
ultimately, it would help with sting care. I'm trying to run some pros in my head. It would help with sting care using option 1.
Correct?
We'd be able to do our
'Cause the
6
only
foot.
kids we would have to worry about then would be 6th graders that qualify, and that would be dependent on what model middle school goes with.
Right, which we're talking, you know, we could be 5 or less. Nice to follow. It's nice to hear what the teachers are saying. I like to hear the 70% thing.
Okay.
So,
Anything
thank you.
else?
Thank you, Mrs.
Okay,
Hanson.
thank you.
Okay, so the next thing to kind of think about is, well, if we don't consider the 14-day, which that is what we talk about at the ICT, is we really, that 14 days is just kind of it's a number there. We know we have some problems in our community, but maybe no worse than other communities. So what I really consider is the active cases for staff members. So there's a link there to our dashboard, and like Jeremy, I think I sent you a PDF of it. It's probably changed already since then. So because we just have to update it as soon as we get information there. So the current active cases for staff members right now is 5. That means they're in that 14-day of positivity. And then current active cases for students, we're at 11. And you can see, you know, 5 of those positive cases came just this week for staff and 6 for students. So we are getting some information on students. So total in quarantine dropped significantly this week. So that's a big improvement, but that kind of was how volleyball and football ended up. We caught, we caught quite a few students at that one in those a couple events there. So that contributed to that. Active cases in the community, really that 14-day case count isn't everything. So I looked, I believe it was early this morning, I looked at Yellow Medicine County. We have 110 active cases. In Chippewa County, 189. Again, their population's bigger than ours. In Renville County, 374. That's a scary high number. All right. So then, as Lisa alluded to, and Ryan did also too, we take a look at substitute needs. And those really are kind of, the things we're trying to monitor more than anything. I mean, the community thing we do need to consider, but our substitutes, our current active cases for staff and students are really those two big items. So last week we met, and just, I know I've communicated this to you folks too. The incident command team recommended that we stay in distance learning till at least January 4th, but I did explain that I wasn't prepared to do it beyond 1 week at a time at this point. They also recommended that we not automatically start Minnesota State High School leagues when that decision is made. And so before we get to all of my recommendations, I'm going to let Tim go. I know this is getting long, so I appreciate your patience. So Tim, you want to kind of give us an update on that?
Can I make one point?
Yeah.
The ICT team met. They did recommend staying distant learning until January 4th. So did our regional team made that recommendation.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. That's right.
Before Tim, Sonia, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, and I know I've emailed Rich regarding this, the number of students that are positive, that to me is just what the parents are reporting to us right now. There could be a lot of parents that are not reporting those numbers just because they're not in
Sure.
school in person, so the parents don't feel like they need to report those.
Sure.
So I just feel like we're probably missing a lot of those because they're not being reported to the school.
Okay.
I could be wrong,
Appreciate
too.
that comment, yep. Okay, thank you, Tim.
All right, good. And I'm just going to start because, and I'm no expert, I've been on the ITC team for a couple weeks. 1 week I presented and bolted. I've really only sat through one meeting, but I think it's important, especially if you guys are going to weigh in on it. You know, we talk about recommendations coming from the ITC team. I think there was 3 questions posed the other night, and the first 2 votes were in the area of 15 for, 2 against. When it came to the activities question, that's tight. I believe it was 9-7. So no, yeah, 9-7.
7 to 11.
Okay, so much closer, and I think you know where I'm going with that. Rich asked me to talk about 4 different areas, and I think I'll do them one at a time and then ask if there's any questions. Some are related, obviously, some are not, so we don't muddle things together. The first thing you actually have on your board books is a 1-page document. Some of you may have seen the one from the high school league that's floated around. That is about a 3-page document. It's color-coded. It's got gray areas. It's got contingencies. It's difficult to understand if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, so I tried to condense it down to 1 page. I think you got the meat and potatoes of what they're looking at. This obviously is all contingent on the governor lifting his orders, and then obviously would be subject to local decisions as well. But it's the high school league's return to play task force information that they got out to athletic directors and school districts here last week. If you take a look, and I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but they're trying to prepare, which is really appreciated from ADs this fall. A lot of times we'd find out on Thursday and then have to be ready to go on a Monday. Now that still could happen, but at least they've taken a look at 3 different scenarios. And actually it could be any date between the 21st and the 18th, or possibly after that. But they gave us possible start dates of December 21st. If you take a look across the top, second model would be a start date of January 4th, and a third date as late as January 18th. And I don't know that they want to spend much time if it gets later than that. As you can tell when you look at the numbers, they're protecting the spring sports. That's the bottom line. They want to see a full spring season. So the winter season obviously the later we start, the shorter the winter season is going to get. They are pretty much committed not to kicking or widening out the winter season any longer and then kicking the spring season into June and possibly July. They want to end that in the middle of June. So, you know, it's basic math. If we start on the 21st, the dance season, who I think is probably got the most to lose here, number one, because of the nature of their sport. It takes a long time to get ready to compete. It's not like basketball where theoretically you give them 10 days and they are ready to go. Dance takes longer than that. Now they've been in season, they've been getting some things done virtually, but you can tell if it goes to Model 2, Their season length is down to 10 weeks. If it goes to the 18th, it goes down to 8 weeks. One of the things that I mentioned on the bottom, I believe it's in the parameters or considerations down there, is there is a, the idea is to leave the number of contests alone, like go ahead and even in the spring, play your 20 baseball games. That takes more of a precedence over the number of weeks, the length of season. Now, it comes with a bit of caveat, because if the rules are still there where you can only play twice a week, that's going to limit. You might not get 20 in anyway, or in the winter you might not get your full 15, depending on the start date. Any questions on the winter numbers or anything? The wrestling one is, you see a couple in there. That just simply means number of contests, number of individual matches. That's under a normal year. In that third to the last column, this is what they're proposing, 70% of regular season contests. So the winter, like I said, it just keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter. The proposed section dates, for those of you who are looking at that, those are the beginnings of the week, obviously, like dance. We usually go second, double A usually goes first, so our section date would probably be March 6th, which may give us an extra week to schedule a contest or two. But that's kind of what they're looking at. They are not, on the long color-coded one, there are some gray areas where you might bump it back a week or be able to steal like the Thursday to start your section competition. Or there might, depending on the start date, they would back it up as much as 1 week. But that's about it in the winter. So what you see on the paper is kind of what we're dealing with. Spring sports, right now, they don't really even have guidelines out for spring sports other than they're going to try to keep them intact. We may be able to schedule 3 or 4 baseball games in a week because it's outside. They just haven't addressed that yet. I've got some parameters down there. I just took the most important ones, the ones that I thought. They're still protecting options for postseasons, even beyond the section tournaments. Remember in the fall there was no state tournaments. In the winter they're still looking at the possibility of state tournaments. Individual state tournaments are going to be really tough. Team state tournaments certainly won't look like they have in years past, but they're keeping that open. To be honest, I don't know. We're going to talk about a bill that we're going to possibly have to pay here. The extra dues coming from the high school league, and it may be, I do think they're looking for options, but I also think that the timing of that is, they want to make it seem like they're obviously, we're getting something from the high school league. That's an argument you could make right now, if we're not doing state tournaments and stuff, what are we getting from them? Although that list is quite long. Questions on winter or spring sports or anything you want to go there? I've gotten all caps on the bottom. Obviously it's tentative. Don't make your calendars out based on this, but it's nice that we have a plan. It's a little broader than a 2-day plan. ADs are, we're ready to go if it starts on the 21st. We'll obviously adjust if it starts on the 4th or any time after that.
And who decides? The governor?
Well, that's number one. The governor would have to lift the executive orders. They would have to change from where they are right now. The pause would have to end. And then obviously after that, this is one of the questions that was posed to the ICT team last Thursday night, was that if he does, are we comfortable going along with the Minnesota State High School League proposed start date? And the answer to that, 11-7, was no. So that's something I think we'll maybe address tonight or maybe again on Thursday night. But yeah, so there's obviously the local decision once the governor's orders are lifted, but that's the first thing. Other questions on that?
No.
The second one is one that you may or may not be familiar with, and it's the return to play, 7-day return to play protocol. The Minnesota Department of Health and the High School League Medicine Advisory Committee, the language they use is strongly recommend. This came in after October 19th, so any new cases after, positive COVID cases after the 19th in our student athletes, they're concerned about acting it. Things like chest pain, tightness, lightheadedness, fainting, extreme fatigue. Not unlike our concussion protocol, when somebody gets diagnosed with a concussion, there's a 7-day gradual return to sport. They're highly recommending that we adopt this and use this in our schools for COVID positive student athletes. It makes a lot of sense on the surface. It does come with some problems that I think we need to talk about. Number one, it adds 7 additional days. This does not, I can tell you from experience, not necessarily here at YME, but with area athletes, it does not sit well with families. Rich talked about that kid that is quarantining for 13, 14 days, ends up being positive. He's got another 10 days. He sat out 24 days. He comes back and he realizes that he's got 7 more days before he can compete, he or she. So obviously that doesn't sit very well. Part of that is for us to get the word out, let them know that it's coming. That hasn't happened to this point, mostly because of the timing and where we're at. But before we start winter sports, we want to make sure we get that out. Cassie, I believe, is sending the paperwork home with any positive student athletes so that the parents are aware. One of it requires them to go in and see a physician, a doctor. There's a 2-page form, one they keep, one that has to come back to the athletic office. The doctor has to sign off. That's another one of the issues. And it may be an isolated case, but I know in Welmer, some doctors are refusing to sign the form. Now what do? We don't have a doctor's signature. Does that kid never get to come back? I think there's some, I don't know if it's litigious in nature, if they're worried about that, or if they're not sure what they're asking. It's pretty straightforward, the paper, but that's been an issue so far. Does it carry over from season to season? We had some issues in volleyball and football. Well, it's going to be a month to 6 weeks from when those kids quarantined, or, well, it's only referring to those that are positive. But do we make them sit 7 days after being COVID-free for 30 days? Do we add another 7 days to that? That's coming up right now. So we've had some kids, some fall athletes that were positive. So they come in, and obviously most of you know those. You miss 7 days of practice at the beginning of the year, you're in trouble.
Tim,
I
are
would
these
argue that
forms
those are the
required?
7 most important days of each and every season.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's right.
Are those forms required?
They are strongly recommended is the language.
Strongly recommended,
Yeah.
okay. So not required, recommended.
That is a good point, right.
Okay.
Who administers the 7-day return? This is difficult. They talk like we've all got medical staff on hand. Right now we're without a trainer even, although we're planning on getting another one here hopefully soon. But that falls on the coaches, and they talk about day one, 85% of your max heart rate for 15 minutes. It's not like you just go put them on a recumbent bike and let them go for 15 minutes, and then, that's got to be supervised,
And that's
not
what they
something
did for
we're
their
skilled
sports
with.
physicals, so I'm sorry. I mean, but that's what the sports physical is for too. And that's what they had done before they can play sports, so,
True.
you know what I mean? That's all
Yeah.
on those forms already.
And what happens if a parent refuses to send their kid to the doctor, I mean, these are
That's
things
an
that
office
we're going to
visit.
have to decide. Now, the one thing, and I don't know if this is where Rich wanted me to go with this, but there are schools that are creating a waiver, so that we're not going to take on all that responsibility as a school district. If you're going to refuse to send your kid to the doctor, or if you are okay with skipping the 7-day return to play protocol, then we're at least going to get a signature saying that you as a parent guardian are going to waive that before we come back. Arguable about whether that holds up in a court of law, but the fact that it's strongly recommended and not a mandate, I don't know where to go with that, but that's one of the things that we're wrestling with right now.
I can see that would be hard.
Questions on that?
And just for clarity, we aren't using those forms yet because it's something fairly new. I know we did have a neighboring district that went through it.
And
That's
they
how I
are-
know
but
about the Wilmer thing.
They are doing it? They are
Yeah.
using those forms?
Yeah.
But
McCray.
if we're talking about the same one, it's the one that's created the waiver, correct? Or maybe not.
Yeah. I don't know if they created the waiver or not. Yeah.
I'm talking, the waiver we got was from McCray, and they've
Yep.
had they went through it fairly early with their football program.
Correct. Yep.
And, yeah, schools are all over the place. Some are just not going to use it. Others are, they claim they're going to use it case by case. I don't know what that means. If it's a protocol, it should be in place. If it's not. So, something certainly to think about. Anything else on that?
So can you explain that to me again? So say we're in season. You're saying if a kid has contact and gets put in quarantine, and then test positive, we can start adding all those days up, and then at the end of it, there's an additional 7 days.
Yeah, one really doesn't have to do with the other. You have to test positive in order, if you're in quarantine, you don't have to come back and go through the
Right.
7 day
I'm just
protocol.
trying to lengthen this out. We're in quarantine, we test positive during that time, all these days add up. At the end of that, you're still looking at, if we follow this, an additional 7 days on top of that yet.
Yeah, it could lead to like a 31-day absence. Could even be more than that, depending on your family dynamics. But in this case, it was 31 days. So after
Yeah.
the kid went through this, come back expecting to play football that Friday night, and they had a 7-day period where they had to ease themselves back in.
Well, and I think a good way around this too is that if you have a family member that's positive, you should isolate, which is what the doctor will tell you. You should isolate in your own house if that's possible. I would think that somebody participating in Minnesota State High School League activities could isolate in their own home. I would think that could happen. The waiver, I don't think it came from McRae. It came from another school, and McRae is one school we know is requiring it. So,
The waiver I saw did come from McRae because it had Jim Trulock's signature
Okay.
on the bottom, but there might be other ones floating around.
yeah.
So, anyway, yeah, agree. Right. The third thing is the additional Minnesota State High School League membership dues. This came up, I think it was introduced a few board meetings ago. If you remember correctly, it was supposed to be two $2,500 bills in addition to what we normally pay because of the financial straits that they find themselves in after not having winter or spring state tournaments to generate money, lost some sponsorships. You're probably aware that there was a push by a lot of small schools about the equity of the payments. Take a budget, so a $9 million budget like ours, the fee was $5,000. You could have had a $100 million budget in the metro and your fee was $10,000 or $12,000. It didn't appear on the surface to be very equitable. So there was a lot of letters and things written to the high school league. They backed the due date up. They took a look at it. Basically, I can tell you that they took $250,000 one-time contribution from the high school league foundation, which generates their money from the taxes on state tournament tickets, and the legislature lets us keep it. Leanne's not here. I turned in the paperwork, but to the best of my recollection, it's about a 14% reduction, what that equals to for small schools like us. So I believe our first bill is $2,500. Our second one was reduced to $1,800. So there was some relief there. They are forming a task force with including small school representation. If you remember Keith Kotke, I think he's from Springfield, superintendent from Springfield, was behind it. He's a mathematician, had tons of stuff done. The one interesting thing is, if you do take a look at it, like he was arguing per pupil and how unfair it was for small schools, and it didn't look good on paper. If, however, you take a look at it per activity, knowing that smaller schools participate in fewer activities than larger schools do, but if you took a look at it that way and looked at the $5,000 that they're asking us to pay and the $12,000 that they're asking bigger schools to pay, it was pretty close. So it kind of depends upon what data you want to look at. I don't think we're going to get to a per pupil charge. I got a feeling it's going to look a lot like this if it's needed for next year. The hope would be that this would disappear as soon as state tournaments are back on and they're able to generate revenue. This shouldn't be something that stays in place for forever. We're hoping it's a one-year deal and they get back on their feet financially. I believe, the question, of course, is what happens if we don't pay it? There's some districts that I think are strongly considering not writing the check. I don't think anybody really knows. The high school league hasn't come out and said if if you're delinquent on your bill, we're not going to let you play in the section tournament, although that could be the case. You lose your league membership, that could be the case. Certainly wouldn't be able to participate in postseason beyond sections, so could end up being an embarrassing situation for school districts if that's what happens. I believe you're going to get a recommendation from our Superintendent Schneider to pay the first half of the bill, and then if there needs to be more dialogue before February when the second half is due, we can do that. So I don't know that I know much more than that, but does anybody have any questions on that additional dues?
I'm glad to know that you think it's not permanent.
That it's not what?
Permanent.
No.
I think it does demonstrate, and Tim and I have talked about this for hours, demonstrates a lack of fiduciary responsibility, if I might say. They should have a little nest egg to live a little bit. And now, maybe not enough to get all the way by, but boy, it sure seems like living paycheck to paycheck is not how you operate an organization like that. We can't do that.
You know, and in their defense, they're a nonprofit, and they can only keep a certain percentage of their, what they make, and that money goes back to schools, in form of paying mileage, if you qualify for state tournament stuff. So they do kick quite a bit of that back when they
Another thing that
roll over. But yeah, I'd just soon not get those checks and actually have a rainy day fund than find us in this situation. So obviously it wasn't not something they could foresee, although they had some financial troubles before COVID hit. So I think this just expedited their need to plan. Last thing on there is I mentioned it earlier, the incident command team's decision not to follow the high school league's allowable start date. Obviously, we talked already about it being subject to the governor's orders and local decisions. I want to talk about the local decision a little bit more. I already mentioned about how much closer that vote was than the other two votes. I realize there are people that feel strongly on both sides. I don't have the right answers. I just want to share some information and a couple of, I guess, my 2 cents. I do feel that it's important to start if other area schools are going to start, so long as we do not have an abundance of student or staff COVID issues. If you take a look at our fall, and we were the only school that I'm aware of in the area that missed those 12 training days. So that was 2 weeks worth of practice for football, volleyball, tennis, whatever we were in, cross country, that we didn't get to participate in. And like I said, those are obviously, I would argue that those 12 practice days, those 7 practice days, whatever you're talking about at the beginning of the season are so important. You miss those, it's difficult to catch up with teams. I can tell you I met with 11 of the 12 Camden ADs today, and I asked them that, if the governor lifts the orders and allows practice to start on December 21st, and I do realize they're in different, geographically they're as far as 55 miles away from us, but most of them are right in our area. All 11, without hesitation, said that they plan to start on December 21. Again, these are athletic directors. They're not school boards. They're not superintendents. But 11 out of 11 planned on starting on December 21. That includes 4 that are currently in distance learning up until January 4th. When I was sitting here, I was listening to Ryan, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but then a lot of it comes down to risk, and I'm not even, I'm not talking about the risk that to our elderly population, to our most, the people who are most susceptible to COVID. But it doesn't appear to me that we're ever going to get all of our high school kids back in this building. Is that unless they reduce the space issues, because right now I'm here, we don't have enough space to bring all of those kids back into the building. And where I'm going with that is, with the risk and the choice is, and I get every event that we have, everything that we offer is going to increase the risk of possible contraction, spread. I think we did a decent job of mitigating that. I realize things are worse now than they were before, so maybe we're talking about when things calm down a little bit. But I don't know how much we're risking. Our kids, if my math is right, if we've only been in hybrid for 9/12 for 6 weeks, those kids have only been in school 15 days. They're not missing out on a lot of school. It appears to me like a majority of their learning is going to be distance. I just think it's important that if we have a chance to do it safely, that we bring those kids back to activities as quickly and as safely as we can. Any questions on that?
I have a question. So we bring them back for sports on the 21st. That gives them 3 days of practice before Christmas break, and then they're back on January 4th. Would the coaches plan on having practices over Christmas break, or would they plan on having 3 days of practice and then be back on January 4th?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most of our coaches practice over the break. I think if we were allowed to go on the 21st, and what that does is allow us to start playing games, I think on the 5th of January, maybe even the 4th, that Monday. I'm sure most would wait until the 5th, because then, but there has to be a 10-day period from the official start date of practice to the first contest date. So I think you'd see more practices over break as a result of where we're at in the calendar, you know. I mean, they still not going to practice on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, things, Sundays we can't do it, but I think you'd see most of them trying to get 7-8 practices in between the 21st and 4th, so that they're ready to go. I think I mentioned in there that if we were to, if they let us go on the 21st and we decide as a district we're going to wait till the 4th, I think we lose a combined 13 events, contests, you know, that theoretically other schools would be playing in. Those would not be rescheduled because of the, you know, we couldn't just drop them on the end of the year because other schools won't have the room to do that. They'll be out of contest dates, so.
Under the current rules, so that would be like girls basketball, boys basketball, dance, every winter sport combined, wrestling.
Including junior high sports?
Yeah, I believe there was a couple of, maybe one junior high girls game. No, there wasn't that first week. We wouldn't play till the second one, so. And again, it may be a moot point, depending on what the governor says, but I do think we need to spend some more time at the ICT team on Thursday night and discuss this. Mr. Snyder and I have already discussed it a little bit more since the last one, but, and then if that, I guess my point is if that vote is close, I think the school board has to be willing to step in and weigh in on that decision. More so than if it's 17-2 or.
Quick
So-
questions.
Go ahead.
So the 7-day thing, I'm trying to wrap this in my head. I know I keep going back to it. So those, let's use a volleyball player that tested positive.
Getting the front end, if you're in a contest, and then you have quarantine for 14 days, and then in that 14 days, you're out for another 14 days, 28.
No, okay.
So simplify it for us.
Let's just start your proposal. You're saying a volleyball player that's positive,
Yes.
10 days from when they're positive.
Okay.
Okay. They're done with that 10 days, no longer showing symptoms.
Yep.
Then they start the 7-day gradual return to sport protocol, where each day they're doing a little bit to assess them respiratory, pulmonary, everything, you know.
So ideally, most of those girls, say their girls basketball started, for instance, they'd be good to go. Am I following that right? I mean,
Well,
or
no.
does it start when girls basketball starts up? Are they calling that active right now?
No, yeah.
Practice-wise.
No, it would be when, I think what you're asking is, would that 7, this is my question, I've asked the high school league and they have not gotten back to me. It's been a week, so I don't know if they'd have the answer. But, so they, like you said, that kid in volleyball who tested positive, sat there 10 days, now it's a month before they start basketball. The day they show up for basketball, that 7-day protocol is sitting there waiting for them.
Well, he asked the Minnesota State High School League, and Cassie has asked the Minnesota Department of Health sports team, and neither one of us have answers yet. So
then let's use dance right now that's having virtual practices. Are those virtual practices counting towards those 7 days then?
Only if they're in protocol. You know, I mean, I know they're doing things virtually, but those kids, again, this wasn't introduced till late October. This is why there's so many questions about it, but that's a whole nother who's going to administer that? So your daughter's at home, tested positive, she's moved to dance, let's say, they're asking her to do workouts in the living room. Well, theoretically, she should be doing, number one, she should go to the doctor. She should get signed off that, yep, it's okay that she starts the 7-day protocol. She should get 15 minutes at no more than 85% of her max heart rate on day 1. If there's no complication, she can go 25 minutes day 2. And then, an hour on day 3. Until finally after day 6, they're ready for competition, assuming they don't take any steps backwards. And unlike the concussion protocol, where if you have a problem on day 3, you just go back to day 2 until you don't have any problems anymore. If you have problems with this, you go to the doctor.
And this is a
which would make sense, but you go back and you get checked out, and you more than likely start all over
Well,
again.
yeah,
This
they're
is a-
trying to assess to see
Right.
if there's something structurally.
Right. So this is a recommendation, not a requirement,
Strongly recommended is the word they
like
use.
everything is during COVID.
Yep.
So take that. Okay, perfect.
Well, and same with the new guidelines from CDC.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, at some point, we're going to have to draw a line in the sand, and what can we live with?
Right. No, I just mentally trying to figure a couple things out in my head with what we're saying, and I mean, we don't technically even have anything in place with this right now, and technically we have virtual practices or something like that going. So how do you tell this student that's had to go through COVID, has put their time in, now has been doing virtual practices, but we haven't stepped up and did anything? Where are we going to start? Where are we going to stop? Where are we going to say, okay, you're practicing, you seem fine, we're going to move on? Where's that line in the sand? I mean, I know it's something we probably haven't thought about, but I mean, obviously there is virtual dance practices going on right now, and I don't know who's what, but let's just assume if they've been out, how long, they've done whatever, they've been through their 7 days. Obviously, we don't have anything implemented right now for the doctor situation, everything like that. When are we going to start this? I know I just said.
Yeah, and maybe we have to consider that as different, being there was virtual practice.
So
It's something we.
just asking a question that we might get asked, so I thought it was
Yep.
the right time to ask it.
And I can tell you, it's a hot button issue with parents who've had kids that have tested positive. It's a bitter pill when they get done and back, especially if activities are going,
Right.
to have to sit 7 extra days. So
Well-
I think we're going to have to figure out if we're going to, do we want to go the waiver route, or are we going to enforce this? I mean, are we going to adopt this and say, yep, this is what we're doing?
Well, and I
And
think as a parent too, we're paying that athletic fee for them to play. And then, you're going to make me pay an extra fee to bring them to the doctor for them to write off. That's $130 office pay, Plus they have to sit for possibly 7+ days. Are they even going to be able to play any sports that year after you've already paid that fee? That's a high cost for parents too.
Yeah. Like I said, what do you do if parents refuse to, are we going to say you're
Right.
not playing until you do
Well-
this? And
Right.
Like you said, the physicians going to be willing to sign this? I can see a little bit of hesitation on that, too. Who knows? We'll have to have a policy for that one, if we decide that.
Don't say the P word.
What was that?
Don't say the P word, policy.
Policy.
Recommendation.
Does this need to be in place or a draft by Monday? I mean, are we talking it needs to be?
Well, we won't, at the rate things are going, we won't have an answer from and in their own defense, they're swamped with things. That's why I don't get responses from either of those groups either. They're just, the volume they're dealing with is high. The waiver is a possibility, so they're going to waive that. Do they know what they're getting into? I don't know.
Well, didn't we have a waiver for like Summer Strong and that sort of thing like last summer?
that's more of a general, we had a COVID waiver.
Yeah.
It's more so that you understood that we were in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
But we always have a general liability waiver. This would be more like I'm aware of this policy or this recommendation, and I'm signing off that's saying that my kid can participate without going through that 7 days, is what we'd be asking them to sign.
I just don't want to see somebody sitting there with their golden ticket and we all of a sudden implement something and things are already getting delayed the way it is, we say, well, you have 7 days to go through this, so.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Is there some that are gonna be grandfathered in?
Mr. Schneider?
Any
would-
new case after October 19th is, again, it's hard to say they're subject to this because it's only a strong recommendation. You know, it'd almost be easier if it were a mandatory deal, but they must not feel like they can do that. And it, yeah.
Well, and they thought they could implement, if you're in distance learning, there's no activities, and how long did that last?
Couple weeks, I think, yeah.
1 week.
My question is, would MSBA have any help in getting those answers? Or would they possibly have asked the question and gotten the answers,
They'll-
or?
Probably pass you on like they did with the other 4 questions I've sent them.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know. I can try. I will put that on my to-do.
You want me to try?
like me.
Yeah, that would be good too. If they see it from both of us, maybe they'll say, oh, this is really serious.
Yeah.
The
But
Schneider
also-
guy just sends us something every day.
Ultimately, the parent could refuse, and there we sit, I
Well,
mean,
then, you're right. That's what I think we need to decide then, is that, are we going to allow that kid to play if the parent waives it? I mean, I don't think it's either got to be a waiver or not, and then we're going to administer the 7 days and deal with the fallout.
well, it's tough to deal with recommendations during COVID. We've seen where recommendations have taken us. So I just don't want this to be something, if they've went through it, I don't know how we properly handle it other than possibly a waiver. And I just don't know how I don't want to spend this much time talking about how to get sports going. I want to spend that time talking about how to get the kids back into school. So where do we go with this?
Well, and
Do we
I think the
just-
two are a little bit tied to each other.
Right.
All right, in a
definitely.
positive and negative way. So, hear me out. So, some people are frustrated because they have nothing for their children. All right, meaning they're in distance learning and there's no activities. All right, and probably if you have a junior or senior child, you're hearing that at home. All right, I'm really bored. This is stressful. I'll just tell you, and I would tell the ICT this, and I told Tim this too. I'm in favor of having activities. Doesn't seem to make sense, right? Because it may not be the most healthy thing in terms of transmission. But today in the nurses, the school nurses thing that we listened to, they were talking about behavioral science. I'm thinking that's behavioral science at the local level. I'm giving something to not pacify, that's probably oversimplifying it, but so that our high school students, especially high school students, have something to look forward to. They have that carrot dangling in front of them. I think Tim and I share that, all right? And I will also say that I'm not in favor of junior high sports starting until middle school is back in school, no matter what the governor decides. So in other words, if he decides that we could start activities on the 21st, I'm not in favor of starting them until the 4th. Simply because I think that allows a little graduated play. We can keep the amount of games for our junior high boys and girls similar, so we don't have a Title IX issue. Our facilities can support it a little bit better, because remember, we're down one facility. So that's my recommendation for sports before I get to education. So I didn't want to put words in your mouth. Is that?
No, that's right, and I didn't mention, it was on my notes, but, we lost our junior high boys season, we split those seasons. We looked at both running them, never starting before January 4th, to address Superintendent Snyder's comment there. Talked about running them side by side, that, it could be done, but it's probably gonna require some early late, has a lot of facility issues, has some coaching issues, because we have some people that do both. Today we met, and I think what we're proposing, what we do is we run the junior high girls basketball season as it was done last year. So from January to the second week of February, from January 4th to the second week of February. And that still leaves us 6 weeks to get a boys season in after that. There's enough schools. I think there's 5 of us that are willing to do that. Gets us 8 games. We could probably hook the tail end of the people who don't do that to get us close to 10 games. I think it's a workable solution. Difficult part, and I don't know how you feel about it, is like wrestling, dance. They're really 7, 12 programs. We have junior high kids, but some of them are on varsity, some of them wrestle 103. So it's hard to separate those kids. Wrestling this year won't have separate junior high matches like we normally do. They'll be all exhibition matches because we can't bring in more than 2 schools to one spot. So junior high programs, if you staring at 6, 7 kids, we're just not going to do that.
So I apologize, and that's what I meant, is that those that are 7 through 12 programs would still have to go. Great example is, like he said, I got a 7th grader that wrestles varsity at 103. I'm not going to hold him out till January 4th if the governor says we're starting on the 21st. That's my recommendation. So for basketball, a little bit more of a facilities issue. Dance, not so much because it's integrated, and wrestling, we just explained. Thoughts or comments about activities? Not done.
The only thing I want to throw out
Thank you,
that
Tim.
we keep in the back of our mind, I totally agree where the kids are at, what this could do for them. But as we start to talk about the education side, I want to think about the number of kids that are not in a winter sport. And I want us to keep that in the back of our mind as we start trying to look at where that decision's going to go.
Okay.
So
then let's talk a little bit about what my recommendation is in terms of approach to get our students back in the building. I would recommend, and so the principals, we had met and we kind of talked about, well, what if we tried to get kiddos here next week? I just think it's going to be a challenge for us to do that, and it might be good just to hold off. So my recommendation at this point would be a phased-in approach starting January 4th. All right? The January 4th and 5th, we would bring back pre-K through 2. January 6th and 7th, we would have pre-K through 5. So by the end of that week, we would have all of the BRE students there, except for Friday. You know, all Fridays are going to be in distance learning. That's a quasi-hybrid model. All right? That's our option 1, right, Mrs. Hanson? So that would be that first week. Then the following week, which would be January 11th through the 15th, the last week of the first semester of our middle school and high school classes, I would recommend right away on that first Monday, we bring back grades 6 through 8 in hybrid option 1, which is Monday through Thursday, all students in. And grades 9 through 12, because it's the last week of the semester, I think it's important that we get more than one day in there. They would come in on the A-B schedule that same Monday through Thursday. Friday would still be in distance learning. It would be an accelerated phased in. It's kind of trying to fit in the middle. So principals, I realize that deviates from what we talked about yesterday, but does that make sense to you both?
So
All right.
can I ask?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the question I would have is the concern there, basically the middle school, high school building would sit empty that whole first week other than the few students that are possibly in there right now. Is it possible, since they're separate buildings, that we could start both buildings at the same time? Or are we worried about transportation?
Transportation is one of the issues, all right? And the other thing is we have to think about that STING care. If we're phasing in those other grades, the third and fourth graders need a place to go on Monday, Tuesday. We could adjust and try and bring our junior high or our middle school in on that Wednesday and Thursday, but then we're not really phasing in. We're really ramped up, not quite as quick as a couple of our neighboring schools, but it's a slower.
I'm just trying to make sense of it. I mean, so the STING care is becoming an issue, not only the transportation, now the STING care is an option.
Well, in some cases, yes, STING care, because we have to have a place to put those kiddos.
So we do have time to consider my option with the KCC possibly,
We sure do.
and we still don't know what option we would use with BRE if we were doing option 1 or option 2. If we do option 1, we're really limiting STING care down to very, very few students, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Monday through Thursday.
Correct.
Friday,
But
they're
nobody would be
nobody's
here on
here.
Fridays. I think we still have to preserve that Friday.
What's the transportation issue you're talking?
Just the capacity in as you put more kids in there, you have greater risk of transmission.
Is that really where our risk is, though? These kids?
We don't know where our risk is.
Well, we kind of have an idea based on percentages and numbers even to date. You know, even to date, if you look at the numbers that we got, the positive students versus total numbers, we're only at 1.6%.
The students that we know of.
But that's a what-if scenario, too. We can't keep doing what-if scenarios, okay? It's killing us to continue to do what-if scenarios. We need to look at what we have in front of us. Right now, unless this changed from when you sent it to me, we're only at 1.6% of our students.
Well, how many students are on there?
But yet we're running in, like Mrs. Hanson said, we're running into staffing issues as well. And that's not really a what-if scenario, that's the facts.
That's reality.
But we're talking kids on a bus right now. You're throwing in a whole nother one right now.
I mean, we're having staffing issues, Sonia, when we don't even have kids in the building right now.
Right.
So I think that's what he's trying to say.
I just wanted to address the busing issue first without throwing in other things. Yes, staffing is an issue. I mean, obviously, that is our biggest issue. They're a much higher percentage than the students. So the students aren't the issue. So when you say, you know, obviously putting more in, it increases the risk, but it's a pretty low risk.
Well, the other thing to think about is whether it impacts it directly, maybe doesn't increase transmission. Understand that if there's one kid on the bus, that can quarantine the entire bus. I mean,
Absolutely.
but that's maybe, like you said, maybe that's a different.
So what that does is it sends the kid back home to learn from home, like a distant learning kind of situation.
The whole bus, yeah.
The whole
But
bus.
they're in a distant learning right now.
Yep.
So at least we'd have the majority of the kids back in school. You know,
Are we asking parents to, like we did in the beginning of the year, to transport their own kids if possible?
Yeah,
To make
that's
that
dwindled
recommendation
down
again?
because, I mean, the majority, by the time we start, the majority of people have started work. That's a challenge for them.
So what do you need from us tonight? What do you want us to vote? Do we need to vote on something?
We wouldn't have to. The reason we're here is to make sure you know what it looks like and what you can support. You can, it's your board meeting. There's nothing saying we can't have an action item out of here. I'm just telling you what I'm going to recommend tomorrow night at the ICT. And if you can't live with that, with what the ICT is going to decide this is your opportunity.
So all our items on our agenda were discussion items. There was no action items tonight. But we can certainly create
The
an action
sports,
item.
for example, can wait till Monday, right? Because no matter what,
Sure.
sports aren't starting before the 21st. So if you want to, if the ICT meets and it becomes 7-11 again, and you folks decide that, you know, I understand what they're saying, but we really believe this situation, we can vote on it on Monday night. I'm a little leery to not empower our ICT. And when I say empower, understand they only make recommendations. The ultimate decision, as the resolution passed, was I make the decision in consultation with the board president. I've not deviated from that. I'd like to believe I probably would have worked harder at last Thursday, because worked harder on those activities than I did if I wouldn't have gotten what I thought we could live with for a week here.
So then, ultimately, let's say you guys meet tomorrow night and choose not to follow your plan. Ultimately, as a board, Monday night, we could readdress it. Ultimately, we have.
For the activities, you could,
What
you know.
about distant learning and hybrid?
Well, distance learning, we would, yeah, you're right. My recommendation is not to start that Monday, the 14th.
Right.
Yeah. I would really, you know, there's a lot of reasons why I want to make this decision that far out, is I want people to be prepared. I understand it's just another, 4 weeks that my student, or 3 weeks, is going to be out. I understand that. That's not lost on me.
Well, and I think that's a light at the end of the tunnel that a lot of parents could sit back right now, and obviously next week with Christmas coming, yes, a lot of them would say, I would kill to have my kid back in school. But if we can ultimately say that we're putting a plan in place to start bringing kids back into school on January 4th, that would be a ray of light. That would be a positive that not only I, but 700 or 600 and whatever students out there would love to hear. So
As
that's
well as
why
the
I'm saying
teachers.
if you have a meeting tomorrow night with the Incident Command Team and you guys vote not to agree with what his recommendation is, but I guess ultimately you can override him anyhow. I'm just,
He doesn't generally, though.
I'm just saying,
we
I
don't
don't
generally.
want,
I'd have to get security.
I don't want parents sitting out there right now listening to what we just said, saying, okay, Monday night we could vote to override sports if Incident Command Team voted it down, but we wouldn't be able to readdress looking at the hybrid model if we're willing to look at January 4th and have a light out there for the parents.
Well, and I'd like to give the Incident Command Team time to consider that too. Maybe they would say that, no, we should bring the middle schoolers back on that Wednesday. We need to empower the Incident Command Team because in some perspective, people probably don't think it represents our community. But the idea behind it with parents, teachers, board members, everybody on there, I think it's a cross-section of representation of our community.
Totally agree.
Okay.
The only thing I'm trying to say with that, if we're going to make it so easy to pass the sports, I want that window open for education. I want to have a ray of light for these parents. I want something out there. If it's voted down tomorrow night not to start hybrid learning on January 4th, it needs to be brought up again then.
Okay.
I know it's bad for me to say that, but if we're going to just move through and pass sports, we better be able to talk about the education side. I want both sides. I want both of them to happen, but we can't just go one way.
My guess would be, yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
I don't want to put words in the ICT team's mouth, but this is kind of already what they've been feeling from
Oh,
the
I
last
totally
meeting.
agree.
So I think this is it's a sensible return or a plan to return to education. And I think the data currently, where we're sitting with all of the numbers, not just the 14-day average, I think it's prudent, the plan you just proposed. So I think it's wise to consider that as a viable option. And I think my feeling is the ICT team will maybe have the same sentiment to some level anyways.
As Rich.
We talked about it last week on the ICT team, about what we wanted, so. Voted on it anyway.
From my understanding, yes, that's the way it happened.
And I mean, all I
We're
was,
not taken into account. Oh, go ahead.
all I was trying to put out there was the comment I made earlier. You know, we're looking at getting the sports going for the kids, for their mental, social, whatever. What about the kids that aren't in the sports? I agree, I want the sports. I want everybody to know that I want the sports, but I want to make sure that we're still looking at this.
That's why we listened to Mr. Luft and Mrs. Hanson
Correct.
with their portion of the education,
Yep.
not just sports. That's why we had
Agreed.
them figure that out.
Agree.
We are not ignoring that.
Agree.
Okay.
Rich,
Okay.
tomorrow are we going to vote on the ICT team on on the elementary model that she proposed tonight? Was it 1 and 2?
Yeah, option one
One or
or two.
Yes.
Actually, I probably won't. I probably will just run with option one, because option two, to me, should be held in our back pocket. So, say we try this again and we fall flat on our face, we're going to have to come up with another plan. At least now the legwork has been done. So, painfully, we could come back in that.
Go with option 1.
But also, I don't speak for you guys either, so.
Okay.
I think we've waited long enough. I think our kids have waited long enough, and I think there's enough parents out there that have waited long enough for the kids to go back to school. The stepped approach of, the phased approach, I'd be willing to listen to, but pushing it all the way out as far as you have, I think that's too far. We are not taking into account that these kids are at home and they're missing out on all the things that come with being in school, not just the math and science.
So what are
They're
you
missing
thinking
out
for a
on-
start date, Jeremy?
I think we should at least discuss going back next week. We haven't even discussed it yet.
Next week? Like next Monday? Is that giving the teachers enough time?
Well, we just discussed that. And that's why I asked, what would it have to be? Can they use plans that were already used at the beginning of the year as a basis to create new lesson plans?
But like Mrs. Hanson said, Monday she's already down staff, so, in elementary, correct?
So a bunch of the issues, and I appreciate the teachers writing in. I've read through all of what they wrote in. I understand what they're saying. I think that risk that they're saying, that they might get sick, that we might lose staff, that kids might get sick, I think that is worth the risk to get our kids back in school. I think it's a bigger risk to have them sit out of school, sitting at home, barely acknowledging that they're even at school when they have their Chromebooks in front of them. They're logged in, they do what they got to do, and that's it. They're really not getting the education they need. They're not getting that face-to-face. I really, truly believe that we are hurting our kids. We don't know the long-term effects of what we're doing to them yet. And we just continue to keep pushing this off. Now, if we get after the first of the year and Jeremy comes back with some more numbers and he throws numbers at us, and the sky is falling because of these numbers, what are we going to do then? Me personally, I'm getting tired of listening to these what-if numbers. Let's address what we have in front of us. What we have directly in front of us, unless these change drastically, only 1.6% of our kids are positive right now. So that means the whole rest of them are not, and we're taking that away from them. We're taking that away from those parents that want that decision to send their kid to school. It's their risk. They're their parent. They know when they send them to school that they might catch COVID. That's a risk they're willing to take. I'm willing to take that risk to send my kids to school. I think it's a bigger harm for them to sit at home. And I don't feel that we're addressing getting them back sooner.
I agree with you that there is a lot of concern with mental health, kids checking out, not being educated appropriately. I agree with you, Jeremy. We also, as a board, have a responsibility to the staff to keep them healthy and safe as well.
Agreed, and that's why I said there was, on
So
Mr.
where do you-
Bluff's, there was 5 items that he pointed out that were staff. So
Mm-hmm.
what do the staff need to feel more comfortable to teach in our school?
Well,
Whatever we gotta get them. If
the-
they say they need a plexiglass shield, fine, get them a plexiglass shield. I would rather do that and get our kids back in school than if they need to suit up, let's suit them up.
Well,
So-
unfortunately,
I-
the suit up thing, you know we can't get that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm
On
just
the other-
saying, let's be creative.
Yeah, so the
Let's
other
get
point.
options.
the
No,
other-
I understand what you're saying.
The other thing that you mentioned is like 1.6% of the students.
Yep.
Well, do you think that that is probably because we've done all this mitigation? Keeping them home, keeping them safe at home rather than together where they can spread it? Don't you think that that percentage is so low
That's,
because,
really, that's another what-if scenario. We don't know that answer.
you know,
Sherry.
and when you say what if, that's what we do. What ifs are what you plan for.
Well, I would
You
like to
can't,
plan
we have
for
to
what
be
we have in place.
proactive, not reactive. We have to,
But it's putting our kids more at risk.
Our
And it's doing
goal
more
there
harm
is-
to them.
Our goal there is to have 0 under staff and 0 under students.
It's not gonna happen.
But Governor Walz also
gonna
said
happen.
you're gonna have a percentage of positive cases in your school. I've compared numbers to districts around us that have stayed in school or stayed in school most of the time. They've done pretty well with their numbers with the kids in school. The kids are still running around. There's kids still out. I mean, I know what he's trying to get at.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wants to rush things. Nobody wants to. I wish we had that crystal ball that we could say January 4th, we're going back to school. I mean,
s-
it's impossible to predict. We all want the same thing.
yeah. So like I said, tonight, this was discussion items. There were no action items on the agenda. If somebody wants to place an action item, we could make a motion to put something on as an action item. Otherwise, I believe it was at the beginning of the year, we did set it up that the incident command team would make the recommendation for the learning model to Mr. Schneider. Rather than it going to a board, because then we would have board meetings every week.
I would like to point
And-
out, that is correct. But
Yeah.
we also are meeting right now, and we are also meeting next Monday. So
Well,
we are
Mon-
coming
ne-
back as a board, so we very well could vote, rather than the IC team voting this next Thursday on what goes on. The whole
So-
reason the ICT team is so that we didn't have to come back as a board, but we're coming back as a board anyways.
Well, that's a
That's
regular
not the
meeting.
reason
taking it
for the
away from them.
ICT.
We
Well, I
decided
didn't.
that they are the ones to make
They
those
are to give a
decisions.
recommendation, Sonia, that's it, recommendation. We've kind of empowered them a little bit more than a recommendation, in my opinion. And I feel like this board needs to have more of a say-so than that ICT team does. That's just my opinion on it, but I feel that that ICT team was there to give recommendation, give their input as a community. And I think they've been empowered and they've been given more authority than what I was led to believe when I said, yes, let's create the ICT team.
Okay. I've kind of gotten lost on our agenda. I think we've gotten through everything. Our next item is storm damage update. Am I correct, Mr. Schneider?
Yeah, so
So we have a
um,
guest.
Matt and I have met quite a bit with, Matt, maybe you want to come up so you can be heard a little bit and kind of give me some.
And,
We done with
yeah, the,
That's what she did.
we are streaming this, so for everyone at home, we would appreciate if you could use a microphone.
He has some more points
Are
he would
we
like to.
done with the whole other portion? I thought we were still in discussion.
Okay. If you want to just hold on a second, Matt.
you know, as far as the IC team, and I've mentioned this before, and they really need to be a voting team. There needs to be a team that votes, that everybody recognizes, that everybody knows how they vote. I know we've had this discussion. We vote as a board. Everybody knows how we vote. They're welcome to address how we vote or give us their opinions or their comments. If that team is going to make a decision for our district and our kids, whether it be school, sports, activities, or whatever it is, it needs to be something that the whole district knows. We got to stop hiding that from them. The people of this district should not be hidden from them who's voting on what their kids are doing. That should not be, that's not right. That's like us taking a silent vote and no one knowing how the school board voted on what's going to happen. with
So
their
Jeremy,
kids.
we as a board run under state law and open meeting law. That's why we vote in public. We do our business in public because we have to follow open meeting law. Incident command team is not part of ruling by that, under that law as an open board meeting. So
That's
completely
fine.
different,
Just because they don't follow
We are
that
in a
rule
completely
doesn't mean
different
that they
situation
can't
here.
be a public voting. Why would they, why are they exempt from that then?
When I think
I-
ultimately, Jeremy, they're supposed to be making a recommendation to Rich. Ultimately, we are the decision. So Rich is the decision. That's why I suppose they can have the votes, not, so you don't know who's voting for what, since they're just making a recommendation. That vote technically isn't supposed to be the decision. That's Rich and Sharon. We're at a board meeting. Ultimately, our vote is the decision. If that made any sense, what I tried
Vote
to say.
isn't the decision though.
It's kind of like a policy meeting, it's kind of like a
Yep.
buildings and grounds meeting. When we have buildings and grounds, and we discuss things, that's not public, we don't have that on YouTube.
they,
The
yeah.
policy meeting isn't on YouTube,
Right.
They are supposed to, they are considered public,
yeah.
but not to make
Vote, you know, like,
votes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we do vote. And initially, we voted openly. So initially, we voted so that everybody knew how you voted.
But you vote for a recommendation,
Correct.
not a decision.
I'm not
Not,
arguing that point.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, when these people vote on this team, everybody in the district should know how they vote. It affects their kids if they're a part of this district. So they should know how that vote is coming in. I don't believe that we should be doing a silent vote on something this big anymore. That's wrong. And all it does is show that everybody else in this district doesn't get to know what's going on. It's hiding
Yep.
things in their eyes. Whether you
I
feel
guess,
that way or not.
I guess I'm sorry, I do not feel that way.
That's, from
Okay.
my experience in talking, that's what we're getting.
Yep,
It's-
okay.
It's a hidden decision, and it shouldn't be. So I would strongly urge that we go back to an open vote.
That decision is put out at every, is it Thursday night? You put that out, Mr. Schneider? It's not a hidden decision. It's
a
put out to
hidden
the
decision
family.
as to how the people voted, though.
And
Not what the results are.
I don't understand, and I don't see the benefit to how that helps the students in knowing how all those 20 people vote.
We've already discussed this, so
Yeah.
why are we discussing this again?
Yeah.
Well, I would like it open back up, and I would like it, I'm making a recommendation that we open the IC team voting to an open voting. And if I have to do I have to make that an action item, or what do we do to proceed? I don't
Yeah.
think we should be hiding it from the district anymore. I don't think we ever should have, but we definitely don't need to be doing it anymore.
You know, if, like I said, all of these were discussion items, in order to get a motion or to get an action item, it would need to be a motion and a second, and a vote to approve it to be an action item, and then we would have a vote on that action item.
Okay. Well, I would like to make a motion
Okay?
to move the ICT team voting to open voting. That's the correct terminology.
Okay, there's a motion. to have the incident command team votes made public. Is there a second? I think to follow Robert's rules, correct me if I'm wrong, I should call for a second 3 times? Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Calling for a 3rd time, is there a second to the motion to make the ICT team votes public? So the motion fails for a second. Okay. We didn't really do that quite right because we should have made it an action item first, but that's okay. Okay, sorry. So now, if there's nothing further, we'll get to our storm damage update.
Kind of an update on our storm damage. Matt and I have been trying to communicate a little bit with Jude. Jude is the adjuster for EMC. I think during my weekly updates, I've tried to keep you apprised of that. Today we met with Scott again. We got some clarity this afternoon. I don't know if you read my email. Did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So they're going to propose a design build concept which would bring that overall cost of $207,000, if I'm understanding it correctly, down to 12% of whatever that is, whatever the total cost of
Was that
each of
12
those
or
bids
11.5?
is. What's that?
Was that 12 or 11.5? The original
12.
was 11.5, so they're going
Yeah,
up a half.
the original was an
Design.
11.5, but that's done differently, and that's why I sent the document. I didn't understand it all. So you and I will have to Zoom with him again next couple of days. So that's where we're at. Unfortunately,
And that's Site Logic.
yeah, that's Site Logic doing it.
There's still a differentiation of about $400,000 between the quotes. The one that the insurance company went out afterwards and got, and Site Logic's. Majority of the differentiation in those quotes is they didn't put any lighting in. They're not going to replace any of the lighting in any of the areas that got damaged. I expressed to the insurance company that, okay, you might drop your cell phone in the lake and grab it quick and it still might work for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but it'll probably die, or there's some effect to that. How can you not cover it if there was water damage to it? And he didn't have a response to that. They didn't have demolition costs broke out in their proposal from their contractor, and I quizzed him about that. He didn't have an answer. He said, get back to us, get back to us, get back to us. He did say that the undisputed amount was from his contractor, the contractor they brought in around Thanksgiving or a little bit before to walk through. I said, how can it be undisputed if we're disputing it? And they don't have all of this information within their proposal. He didn't have a response. He kept on trying to push that amount, that lower amount, obviously, because they're insurance companies and that's what they do. If they can readjust their quote to include everything that Site Logic has in their quote, it's going to be within a couple percent. Between the two companies, it'll probably be within a couple percentage points. He doesn't understand that. And there's so many open loopholes with their company that they're going to get to that Site Logic's amount. They are. with the undiscovered, once they start tearing into walls, undiscoverables, they'll just open the checkbook, open the checkbook, open the checkbook. So, that's kind of where it's at right now.
So, you know, ultimately, we're going to have to just choose, and I've said this a few times, to move on and start doing this work. I have no doubt that Jude's going to have made promises that he can't keep, and an attorney is going to have to be involved. But we can't wait. We can't continue to get their commitment to it, otherwise it'll be next fall before we even start demolition. I would really like to have that space used in some capacity for getting kids back in here and for activities, even if it's only for practice. So the current building services agreement is not written the same way here. He's working on that. I hope to have something to you tomorrow. We'll probably Zoom with Scott tomorrow. He knows a little bit more about contracts than me. Scrub some things out of there. A couple points we've made is we're going to need multiple bids on things so that if this does go to litigation, we will have grounds to stand upon. All right? Well, there's a couple of the other things. Terms and conditions. We're going to have to be a little flexible with those terms and conditions. We both are could end up with a little bit of cash flow issues here. But thank goodness we do, not promoting us spending our reserve. We do have some reserve there to do. Jude made a promise the other day about advancing us some money. I don't know. That could be talk.
He made the call of cutting the check for what's already been done, and he hasn't even done that.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in the mail today. Leanne wasn't here. It maybe came in the mail.
Hey, Rich, he was supposed to have done that in October when we
Yes.
sat down. I'd like to have a Zoom with him and his boss, like we were going to have on Friday. I still
Yep.
think we should have that Zoom.
His boss didn't show up, though.
I know. I think we should reschedule a Zoom.
Did we ever find out why his boss didn't show up?
He was in another meeting. He was expected to be there.
Going to be in that meeting at what?
1:30 or something.
1:30, but he never joined, but Jude had jumped off before 1:30.
You know, and I understand, I'm just as frustrated as everybody, but if we continue until we have all the power, again, we won't get this done.
There's going to be a certain amount of risk. It's who do you feel more comfortable with going forward and assuming that risk? It's what it comes down to. You have
The
a
one
complete
thing that-
proposal or you have an incomplete proposal. You know your defined risk on this one. You do not know your defined risk on this one.
I suspect that EMC would not have any problems if we went with Perfection Property Restoration. They would have no problems. They would probably, at least that's what I'm led to believe right now.
And pay
And-
out extras.
Yeah, but would they pay out?
Right.
Are they tabled at the 1.2?
Right.
Or are they just saying that now because it's a lower number
Yeah.
and we haven't hit them with the scope yet?
Yeah, if they came back and said, yes, any additional stuff that this contractor exposes and says we'll pay for, yeah, Precision, fine, we'll go with them, but you're paying everything.
But Precision's is basically lowballing it to get their foot in the door.
Right.
They could come back with change orders later.
Yeah,
But-
that's what they'll do.
Yeah,
They
So
left
they
so many
undercut
loopholes in their
Logic is
proposal.
what they did.
or
Ridiculous.
Site Logic can pick and choose out of theirs and kind of play the game with EMC. It's a matter of trust, and I think any of us that have been in a meeting, I feel more comfortable with anything Site Logic's doing over anything related to EMC.
Scott's a retired superintendent. We got to trust him, Rich.
Some of us are shady.
I like the concept, from Friday's conversation, really going into this week with the 3-bid thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we're protecting ourselves pretty well.
It's showing that we're having somebody do the due diligence.
Exactly.
To make sure that we're getting a quality number and a quality product.
I mean, October 15th, 14th, whenever it was we met, at that time, Jude told us within 2 weeks, we were going to be able to go ahead and start with demo. You were going to have a check whenever. I mean, I agree, we got to get going. I mean, enough is enough with this.
So if we had a contract Monday with the language that you guys wanted, and we executed it, how soon could they get going?
I would guess if we agreed right
They'll
now,
have to go out for quote, and I'm sure it'd probably be a January start. So
Yeah.
it's not like we're gonna, I could almost guarantee we're not gonna be using it this season. As far as basketball goes. To rip up the floor, to do the demo of the ceiling, to rip out the floor, build everything back, it's not gonna happen in a
But
month.
what phase are we going to do? Are we going to do the demo pause phase?
we won't have a choice in my mind, right? Because we're demoing it to see the scope of what we need to repair, right? And then we'll have to order supplies, which will be delayed, right?
Well, we know certain things have to go back in, right?
Yeah.
Gotta put a gym floor back in there.
Yeah.
There's contracts that can be let, knowing how it's going to be built back.
Yeah, and so, and I don't know what the delay on a floor is or anything like that.
Well, you'll have to make the decision, everybody likes a nice hardwood floor for playing basketball on, but there is composites out there as well. And this guy probably has a little bit of input in that as well.
Yeah.
So what do you want from us, Rich? Are we
I'm just giving
just
you a
discussing it? And
heads up. And so, shoot me emails with questions, things that, I don't have a problem trying to field that. Matt's pretty knowledgeable, so we'll keep moving forward. Okay?
would you be okay if I listen in on that Zoom tomorrow?
I don't know when it will be yet.
Just-
Wait,
If you do, no, just.
tomorrow's a horrible day for
Okay,
me, I will tell
right.
you.
I agree then. Just send it to me when you're going to have it, and if I can get on, I know
Okay.
I've been listening in, I'd love to.
I might be able to get like a 132 tomorrow. I don't know.
No, it doesn't matter. If it's not tomorrow, it's not tomorrow. Just keep me informed when you're going to have it, and I'll gladly
Okay.
listen in with you.
Well, currently where they're at, with the last email that he just sent me, they do a design build, so they run all the contracts through them, submit the bills that they receive to us per payment, and then plus their 12% fee. That's a flat 12%. So if they're sending us the quotes or of the contractor,
Sure.
we know what their 12%
Sure.
is gonna be as things progress along.
Sure. So really, there's probably not much for me to hear in the meeting, but,
Yeah, it's,
so,
it,
we got to get going.
yep,
I agree.
I agree.
We got to get going.
All right.
So for
Thank you.
for those watching at home or wherever they are, could you just introduce yourself and explain to everyone how you are helping us with this?
Matt Lipton, construction liaison.
Thank you.
Liaison, I like
Liaison.
that. Then we don't
Perfect.
have any obligation.
Yeah.
No, it's,
Wonderful.
he's helping us because quite clearly I don't know a lot about construction, so.
We appreciate it.
Just
Well, I'm
try to
learning.
Get it hammered out and, path that we can see an end.
Yeah. Because we need the space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, thank you.
Last item to talk about, if you don't mind
Go ahead.
Just expediting it. Is the early notification of intent to retire incentive. I will, barring your objection, I will meet with them. This is the same thing I proposed last year. We do need to meet with them to negotiate it. I don't know that we'll have time for the whole negotiating crew to meet with them. I'll get some dates, and maybe a couple of the negotiators can meet with me and those people. I don't care if everybody's there, all the negotiators, so I'll try and do my best. I want to go forward. This helps us at Finance Committee meeting. We know we're going to deficit spend this year, and worse than what we budgeted. So this at least gives us an idea going forward what we might see in terms of retirements, and if we should let unfilled positions sit, or if we're going to gain something from hiring a less experienced teacher. It gives us a little bit better handle on the budget. Okay?
Okay. So,
Anything else?
anything else? Nope.
I have
So
nothing
upcoming-
unless you folks do.
Okay. Upcoming events. We do have our board meeting next Monday, December 14th, here in the Little Theater at 6 p.m. It will be streamed on our YouTube channel. December 23rd at 1 p.m. we have early dismissal. Christmas break is from December 24th to January 1st. And I just want to comment too that with so much discussion of mental health with the students, I do want to just have anybody that is having struggles mental health wise to reach out to our social workers, our staff here, because it is so necessary to keep everyone healthy physically and mentally these days. So, please reach out. Okay. Nothing else? I'll call the meeting adjourned.
Thank you, folks.